Hey, welcome to the Story Studio podcast. Today we're gonna delve deep into the psyche of Dave. Actually, the psyches of all of us. So basically, this is kind of I don't know how this episode is going to work out, which is fun. It's the new high wire nature of the Story Studio podcast. But I was thinking about like what each of us were probably like as kids and how it's informed us as adults. And I know you're probably
Dave's
like,
already giddy.
Dave's already giddy. Yeah, I mean, you might be like, okay, so who are we? Why does anybody care? But I think that there's a deeper lesson in here about if you're a writer and you're writing characters, you can never go wrong with understanding more psychology, more about what makes a person who they are. I've talked about this with my kids. Like, hopefully, like we'll see if I'm right. Things that we're doing now and that are occurring now, and I'm trying to project them forward in time. How will this impact them? How will it make them make decisions? So I think it might be an interesting character study, if nothing else.
So how do we start on this?
Yeah, I kind of don't know. Do you want to? Maybe we should each talk a little bit about just like a quick roundtable of how we were as kids, and then delve deeper. Like because I'll bet each of us is significantly different from how we are now. That's kind of the point of growing up.
Well, okay. So are we talking about like what are the significant stories? Like, hey,
I was thinking more personality, but I think that stories are going to inform personality.
Okay, so personality. I was talkative.
What?
Yeah, I was.
Were you obnoxious too?
I was really talkative. I was obnoxious.
No.
Yeah, for sure.
Were you a mile a minute? Were you hard to keep up with?
Yes.
You know how Haley's just all energetic and glad. Like, were you like
yeah,
that?
I was a lot like Haley, actually, in a lot of ways. Haley definitely reminds me of me in some very specific ways. Haley reminds me of a cross between me and my sister in a lot of ways. She's got a lot of Megan in her. She's got a lot of me in her. But she's definitely, I mean, verbally, yeah, not just the way that we articulate ourselves, but kind of the way we think. And honestly, some of the things about her right now that annoy me the most are things that they annoy me because I see myself in her, and I see myself as a teenager, and I just want her to be better faster than I was. So, yeah, no, I actually think Haley's a lot more like me as a teenager than she was as a little girl. When I was a little boy, I wasn't quite who I am now.
How much of it was, because I imagine you came across as somewhat fearless or totally fearless. How much of it was fearlessness? How much was it maybe naivete or obliviousness? Like the kind of thing where like something maybe you should have been afraid of, but you weren't, and you were maybe a little too brave?
Well, there was both. It depended on my environment. So when I was in like, I want to say 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, I had like 2 lives. So I would go to regular school, like elementary school. And then after school was over, I got picked up by the YMCA bus, and we got taken to the YMCA, and I'd be there from like 3 o'clock in the afternoon until like 6 o'clock.
I did that same thing at the YMCA.
Right. Okay. So like, that was awesome. Like how is it that we've known each other for 7 years and never ever knew that? Because that's kind of awesome.
I don't know. It's fun to stay there though at the YMCA.
So I actually really enjoyed being at the Y, where I hated school, because at school I was a poor kid compared to all the wealthy kids that I went to school with. My parents, through like a bunch of shenanigans, always made sure that we were not in a neighborhood school, because I totally lived in the ghetto, not too far from Snoop in the LBC. True story. And
is that where they had 2 campuses called Predator and Prey?
Yes, they did. It was not the best neighborhood, and so my parents always made sure that I went to a good school in a better neighborhood. But I was always like, we'd get back from Christmas vacation or whatever, and everybody'd be talking about how they went to, Mammoth or Maui or some other luxurious place, and I would just, oh yeah, well I got to go in and strip roses. It was awesome. So I avoided
a drive-by shooting.
Right. I was always working, or helping the family or whatever. But it did give
Sean's
me,
holiday stories were like Tupac's.
it was a little bit like, it did give me something to want. Like, I actually think that wanting was good for me. I was never, ever bitter about it at all. I was like, oh, they have something, then I can get that too. I just have to work hard. Like,
I would kill them all.
Yeah, I was never, I was not a jealous or a bitter kid or human. Like, I'm not, even now. I'm not jealous or bitter about anything or people who have more than me. I just think, oh, well, they did something smart. Maybe I can do something smart and figure that out. So, yeah, growing up, I'd go to school and I was really shy because everyone lived, like, it was the kind of schools that I went to, because there were a couple different ones, but they all had the same characteristics, which was the kids all knew each other and had since kindergarten. They all lived in the same neighborhood. Their friends, their parents all hung out. So they had like really tight knit groups. And for the most part, they all had money. And I was a tourist into the world where they were citizens. And so I was always an outsider. But then I'd get picked up. I'd go into the Y van, and 10 minutes later, I'd be at the YMCA in Los Altos, and I was cool all of a sudden. Like, kids liked me there. The counselors liked me there.
Well, because they thought you were Mexican at the time.
They didn't know you was Italian.
Right.
That is true. But I always had, like, I always had a much bigger friend group. And I mean, instead of 2 friends, 20 friends. Like, it was totally different. And so I'm really grateful for the YMCA. I actually don't think I would be nearly the person that I am without that, because it gave me a place to kind of show off and be cool. It's where I had my first kiss. It's where, like, okay, so actually this is a good example. I had my first kiss, my first like actual real kiss, like, with a girl.
I was wondering if it was like a counselor or something.
No. It was with a girl.
Mr. Jennings, stop kissing the kids.
It was when I was in 4th grade and she was in 5th grade, and he was going to move to San Jose like a week later, and we were just like, we obviously liked each other, and it was like the only chance. So it was probably earlier for both of us, but that happened. That kind of stuff would never happen to me at school ever.
Did you knock her out with your nose when you went to kiss her or poke her eye out?
I didn't go to kiss her. She
now has a pet.
Did she say there she blows?
Yeah, something like that. But it was right there out in front of the YMCA pool. Like, I had a lot of really great memories in that space that gave me a lot of confidence that I don't think I would have developed otherwise. I think that if I had just been like the nerdy kid at school that I was during the day, like if I'd only been Clark Kent and never had a chance to feel any kind of Superman, then I think it would have fundamentally changed who I was by the time I got to middle school, when I did develop a little bit of confidence going into a new setting.
See, that's interesting. And it's exactly why I thought this might be an interesting topic, because there are things in that story that caused who you are today in a very deliberate way. So I was thinking of like myself. I don't know what made me think back to my childhood personality, but I think it would be easy for people who know me in this capacity. Yet again, I had somebody tell me that they were intimidated by me. I swear I don't try to be intense and stuff, but I guess I project that. So I could see people saying,
"You're Patrick Bateman. What are you talking about?"
Well, people could imagine like young Patrick Bateman, right? Like, could imagine me in school and he was probably all like intense and stuff. And I wasn't at all. I was nerdy isn't quite right, but I was certainly not cool in like grade school and stuff. I was definitely I didn't get bullied or anything like that, but I was a little like, how like there was that dynamic of, oh, you like somebody. If you wanted to insult the person, you'd say you like somebody and be somebody like gross or unappealing. Like I was, they'd say that about me. Like, oh, you like Johnny.
You like Large Marge.
Yeah. And so, right. Large Marge. Some Large Marge saying. And, but I definitely had a species of my trademark arrogance and cockiness. It just wasn't the same kind. It was more
you
like
preppy? Did you like wear a tie? Were you like Alex P. Keaton?
I actually did go through a period where I really liked to dress up, but it wasn't preppy. It was more like, I just kind of remember to do it, like wanting to do it. That was more high school. And I, about halfway through high school, I think I got a little bit, I got a little cooler. Like I actually had friends in all the groups. Like there was no group that I alienated or that I was part of. I did float. But I wasn't like real gregarious. I just
You felt like you would in a sensory
in a
deprivation.
sensory deprivation tank, or like Dave. But what's interesting is I think that I have this like all right, arrogance, I guess, today, but it was more of like an intellectual. I definitely always had that one better than that guy, even when I was being trampled upon, even when I was kind of getting shit and being like, I was never at the top of the social ladder. And I wanted to, like, what Sean will tell you right now, one of my things is respect. Like, if I feel like I'm being just not in a mafia way, but if I feel like I just got kind of shit on, respect, like, well, that person doesn't.
The other day, he was like, "Did you diss me? Did you diss me?"
That is one of my triggers. If I don't feel like I'm getting any respect, that bugs me, and I think it probably came from all of this stuff. Like, because I wasn't respected. Like, I kind of had to fight for that. I had to scrap for that. And I think that that's stuff that informed who I am today. But I don't think people would think that. Would you have guessed what I just said if you were like, imagine young Johnny, or no?
I actually would, but I think I have a lot more insight than most people to this particular thing. But no, that doesn't surprise me. It doesn't. I don't think I necessarily expect it, but it in no way surprises me, I guess is the best way to say that.
I figured Dave would imagine me walking around with abs and rubbing on everybody's faces.
Yeah, I am more surprised that you are the way you are with the father that you have, like the artistic father. I think you'd be a little more hippie.
Well, he wasn't that way at the beginning.
He wasn't that way when he was growing up.
Yeah, he wasn't. That happened. I mean, he wasn't a hippie. I could see how you could say that now, and I would agree in a little bit of a way. It's more like he's free-spirited. He's an artist. But he was very, very uptight and white collar. That was his upbringing. Like, he only listened to classical music, like to the point where anything else was shit. Now that changed when he met my mom, but that's kind of how he grew up. He always had, as a kid, like the very perfect buzz cut, cause that was the thing. You couldn't step out of line. And he was never, I don't remember him being strict, but I always remember him having a temper, something that I inherited. And he and my mom got divorced when I think I was 3. So I was largely raised by my mom, who had her own business and was the entrepreneur. Like, that's where I got a lot of that, was from her. And then I think what I got from him was the same thing eventually. Like, I'm not going to work for the man once he got out of it.
And daddy issues.
And daddy issues. I don't feel like I actually ever had daddy issues, but I don't think people with daddy issues ever feel that way. So maybe I do. And that's
I wasn't judging. I was joking.
Well, that's okay. You're allowed to judge. But yeah. So that was me.
So Dave, I know what was little Davey like?
Okay, when I was a kid, I was a lot like your optimism and energy and naivety, all rolled into one.
How am I naive? I need to explain this.
You believe the best in everybody until they prove you wrong.
Okay, but isn't that like
optimism? Optimism.
Right. I don't know that makes me naive. I think that's kind of a good life skill. Is it possible that if you traded that, you might be a little more successful?
Maybe I would. Yes.
Okay, so just
I admit I definitely have issues.
Your definition of naive is believing the best in people until they prove themselves otherwise.
Well, I was naive. Well, I'll get to that in a second. Okay, so as a kid, I was like super innocent. I would never curse. My father was strict. My mother, she wasn't strict. She was just, she stay-at-home mom. Yeah, hot. Stay-at-home mom, and sort of anxious. I think I probably get a lot of my anxiety from her. Probably very helicopter parent before that became a term. Worried about everything, and that definitely, yeah. So where I lived, like over the period of a year or two, it like every white person but me and like one other person left. So like the neighborhood changed in an instant. And at the time I don't think I really I mean, obviously you noticed, but I didn't think anything negatively of it until like crime started to impact us. And there were kids that would like, all of a sudden I was like the white devil, and like I would get
Did you actually
bullied.
get called white devil?
Yeah, Cracker, Honky was a big one back then. And some of it was like people that I was friends with before, and all of a sudden, like just this shift happened, and it was
How
very.
old are you here?
What's that?
How old are you in this story?
Probably 8 or 9, I think. That's kind of. I think 7 was my last happy year. So,
So that's like second grade?
what, 7?
Yeah. Is that right?
Yes. Hmm. So anyway, so there was just this shift in that movie. I've talked about it before, but that movie Roots came out, and that's when like it exploded, like just how bad white people were to slaves back then. So I think a lot of kids just saw it, and all of a sudden they're like, well, there's only 2 white kids around here. Let's fuck with this one. He's going to pay. And it hurt because
you would have been 7 time-wise.
Okay. So right around that time, like I just felt alienated in my own town. And that was like the beginning. I was still optimistic, and I still had some friends, and like not everybody, completely like left me. So I was still relatively happy. And then what happened was, my mom got mugged. Our house was almost broken into. Other people's houses were being broken into. Like it was getting really bad. And my dad, like, we got to get the fuck out of here, because if not, we're going to be dead. So we moved to the suburbs, and we couldn't really afford it. So it was basically stretching ourselves very thin. And my dad was a construction worker, blue collar guy. And we moved to the suburbs where I was suddenly like, I was around a bunch of white kids, but I was nothing like them. And they were like really like probably like the disaffected sort of rich kid assholes, like the worst of the worst. Not all of them, but that's kind of the group that was around me. And here I come in, this very naive, innocent kid, and immediately like they just pounced on me, and that like began the bullying, because I was different than them. I was I wasn't an asshole. I was like this. I wouldn't even curse.
Did you start creating more? Like, is that where, like, when did you first start drawing, not as just something to do, but something to escape, or writing as a place to escape?
That was in middle school. And what happened was, like my OCD really began going bad then, and I blinked a lot. And like one of the most humiliating things was when I met the girl that like lived behind me, and like I just thought she was beautiful. I was like 10, and all the friends are around. Same age. We're the same age.
Oh, okay.
So 10 or 11. So like this is when I first moved in, and I'm meeting all these people, and like I hadn't yet realized I was gonna be fucked with. Met her, and like I was blinking a lot. That was like one of my tics. And she just laughed at me and like called me Blinky and a rabbit and stuff like that. And then like another, in like the most popular kid who also lived near me, he like invited me over to his house, and he's like,
I know this story.
He invited me over to his house. He's like, hey, you want to lift weights? And I was like, okay, cool. Like this popular kid, like, I'll make him friends. And as I'm lifting like barbells over my head, he takes the what do you call it? What do you call the little one? The dumbbell, punches me right in the fucking nuts. And
which is just like a what the fuck? Like it's
right.
Almost. I mean, it's almost like somebody wrote that scene, because it's hard to believe that somebody would actually do that.
It does sound like a very written scene for
right.
Sure.
Yes.
And that scene, I will tell you, as having written with Dave for 10 years, that scene has shown up in 20 of our stories in a different way. Like
never that way.
No, never that way. But
yes.
It's that scene. I'm telling you, scene.
The betrayal and the pain of just being like, you are not one of us, fuck you. And what made matters worse is like, the right thing to have done was for me to go home, lick my wounds, and not tell my parents. But I told my mom, and she went out and yelled at everyone. Did not help matters at all. So
I cannot imagine it would.
So that began me being a pariah for the rest of my life. Basically in middle school and high school, I found, books. I always got lost in books and comics and stuff like that. And I wanted to create my own. I wanted to create my own worlds to get lost in, with the idea that someday I would create worlds that other people would get lost in, and that would be their escape. And like, that's just what I always dreamed to do. And now I'm doing it. And yeah. But as far as like a lot of my cynicism and stuff like that, it happened from, my childhood. And while I understand a lot of it now in a way that I didn't then, it's still like, it's like, oh, you should just fucking get over it. I don't, it's difficult. The scars are there.
Is there any part of you that appreciates it for the person? I already feel the trap that I'm walking into here, but like for because it made you an artist in a way, like it gave you substance. It's the whole idea of, we can embrace our pain, although it sounds like a lot of
gamma rays that made you into the hole.
I can appreciate it now. Like, I think if I had been happy and I had a normal life or whatever, like I might not be what I'm doing. I might, I don't know. I don't know what I'd be.
Well, that's the thing. I think that, I forget, there was something in the last episode we recorded that made me think of this, is that it's kind of the idea of, anything like if the clock is still ticking, then you can't really fail. It's just a pit stop. It's a plot twist, right? Is that, your life taken as a totality has gotten you to, I mean, let's just set aside, like you got the personal shit, but like professionally and like this is pretty cool. This is a pretty cool life that we live, and it wouldn't have happened if you hadn't had those experiences. So maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, yes, because like the life I led, I was always an outsider, and that kind of led me to becoming a reporter because I wanted to use my investigative abilities for good and, help people tell their stories, help expose, corruption and stuff like that. And I did that, and that made me, want to write fiction more because I wasn't writing my stories, I was writing other people's stories. And then the paper folded and I met Sean. So that would never have, like, all these things never would have happened had A, I not become a reporter, and B, not met Sean. I think I would have created, but I don't know that I would have had the same success. I'd probably have written one book by now. So,
well, if I hadn't had a catastrophic financial meltdown ending in bankruptcy, I wouldn't be doing any of what we're doing. And that sucked at the time, but it's nice for where we are now, I guess.
Ditto. I just think that all of our hardship is there for a reason. I think that, it's, what does Campbell say? The inside the deepest cave that we're most.
Yeah, I liked that. We heard that quote yesterday, and I don't remember it exactly, but it was wonderful. It was something like, inside the darkest cave is the thing that you desire most.
The treasure we desire most. Or, a simpler way to put it is, our deepest wounds, are usually adjacent to our greatest gifts. And it's just kind of a fact. Dave, one thing I'm curious about is if you had all of the, let's say you had like a lot of shit together in your life as far as a schedule that you were happy with, and you're producing both visually and, you're creating both written work and visual work that you're real proud of. And you're just generally happy. You're making a little more money. You have a little more time in your schedule. Is therapy something that you would want to do, like digging into your past like that? Or is it a painful place to go that you want to understand? Or are you just happy to get past that stuff and be happier and not really dig in?
I think therapy could help. I mean, I've been trying to fix myself for years, and like I feel, closer to it than ever now. Like just certain things. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure where to go with that question.
Well, if any of you out there are sort of wondering, the point of this episode, there's a couple of things. So one is, the better you understand yourself and what pulls your triggers, I think the better storyteller you are. There are biases that come into our writing that are from us, and there are biases that come from character, which is where they should come from. When a writer is real heavy-handed and has their own agenda, and they don't know it, and they're just doing it, and they think, well, of course a character would think that because I think that, and they don't know it, then that's usually a mistake. But also just understanding that any of us are people, and that your characters should be constructed like people, can really add some depth. So the clearest example of this would be understanding that all the bad guys are the good guys in their own story. There's something that explains why the bad person went bad. There's something that explains why the good person is good. And there's something that explains why somebody who seems good actually is really doing shit to mollify themselves, and really they are kind of a monster. Like, these are all wonderful things that came from events in their past that are perfectly understandable.
Yeah, I spent a lot of, because I've always felt alienated, I've spent a lot of my life like exploring the darker sides of human nature to understand why people do the horrible shit that they do. Like, how do you get from, normalcy to just, being an abuser, being somebody that, kills people in the Holocaust, or just any of those things. Like, I've always been drawn to trying to figure out what the hell happened to humanity. So,
well, you do have an anthropological approach to your fiction, because I think a lot of people could write the characters because you guys write some pretty heinous fucking characters, and you could write them. Well, I mean, seriously, like, you could write them as boogeymen, and they're
that's not fun though.
But I can't think. I mean, I haven't read a lot of your stuff because dead children and stuff, but I haven't seen or heard about a single instance of somebody being portrayed, even the worst of characters being portrayed as the worst of characters. There's an attempt to understand them. And honestly,
even our very, very worst character at least is understandable. Not necessarily forgivable, but understandable. Like, and not even understandable as in like, oh, well, that's okay, I understand. But you can trace the root. You can say, because of X, Y, and Z, that is why this thing is that way, rather than just as the author declaring that it is that way, which is lazy writing and terrible.
Yeah, I've always been drawn to trying to understand like the darkness. Yeah.
Well, where's the line where it starts to feel like, or does it start to feel like maybe did you ever start to feel like you're trying to understand too far? Like, I feel like the in 12, because I read that one, there's a child molester, as there are in a lot of CI stories. And I thought I remembered you telling a story, Dave. I thought I remembered you telling a story where it was almost uncomfortable because you didn't want to go there. You almost didn't want to, like, you thought it might be like justifying or something like that. Is there ever that line where it starts to feel like, okay, I'm trying to understand them, but now I'm kind of condoning this tacitly by understanding them?
I don't worry. Well, I don't know if I worry about condoning it. I worry about, I think when you get into the headspace of really dark people, like racists are a big one. Like, we've written many racist characters, and like, you want to portray the accuracy of it, but at the same time, you don't want to be like, is that how he thinks? Like, is he calling everyone the N-word? Just to portray people
47 times in one chapter.
But yeah, portray people as they are, but not be a caricature, not be, I don't know. I think trying to think. It's like walking to the edge of like the absolute worst of what humanity is, and just stepping back a little bit, enough to understand it, but not become either desensitized to it, which is always a danger when you just see horrible things like the news. But also, like, okay, like one good example is when I was writing, are we saying titles of older books?
A book.
yeah.
I was writing a book about a guy who lost a child in a car accident. So I was studying like car accidents because he's going around taking pictures of them. So I went on this website where there was like this video of a car accident, which was like, I think it was in Russia, and it was like, I don't know, 20 fucking cars or something. It was just, and I needed to see, although I'd seen one very horrific accident in real life.
Please don't tell
Which
that
you
story.
told our dinner party about.
Yes. But I needed to see specifically for the, for like the things that this guy would be focused on when he was, you know, taking the pictures. And there was somebody that had walked up to all these cars where people were fucking dying and just video on them, not even helping them or anything. And it was like a pregnant woman that was dying in the car. And when I saw that, I was like, that hit me so hard. Like, that was hard. That was like I think the lowest I felt. Most of the darkness stuff though, I can imagine or exaggerate from, you know, real life, because I think we all know people that have been abused and have heard stories of that. And like a lot of the people that beat their kids and stuff, that's drawn from, you know, a couple of friends of mine that had fathers that beat the hell out of them. And so that's easy to exaggerate and get into, but something like a horrible car accident and just seeing visually what that I think was too dark. That was just like too much.
Whew, I need a break from Dave's past.
Right.
What's inspired by your past in childhood?
Puppy dogs and kittens.
Yeah, rainbows, unicorns.
Yeah, well, rainbows and roses, actually. So this is worth mentioning.
Sean's family flower shop was called Rainbows. That's worth pointing out.
Yes, and then I spun it off into a few other locations that we called Rainbows and Roses because we just sold roses. And so
you didn't sell rainbows?
We did not. We did not. Although I do remember many conversations while we were growing up where my mom and dad would have this recurring argument about where the apostrophe went in rainbows. It's kind of awesome. So
plural, more than one rainbow, no apostrophe.
If there would even be a right
all day long. Rainbows, more than one rainbow.
Well, that is the way it was, but every once in a while
you get on the horn with your dad and you tell him that's what I do.
Well, my mom's the one who would object. She wanted the apostrophe. Rainbow was a dude and he owned it. She made this argument. Anyway.
Okay,
was your name Rainbow at some point?
Say no more.
No, it was not. But we had an ice cream parlor called Moosey's, named after my sister, who was nicknamed Moose because when she was born, she was big, and my mom and dad turned to each other and said, "What a moose!" at the same time.
What did they say when you were born regarding your photography?
Oh, that's a great story. So I was so ugly when I was born, my mom refused to let the nurse take a picture of me. That's a true story.
Talk about dark.
Yeah, I gave her shit about that my entire life.
So there's no photo of you as a baby?
Not the day I was born, no.
Not day one.
That day.
Wow. Was it that your nose was so big?
I was all balls and nose when I was born. Yeah. So
still are.
Yeah.
She was pissed because he did so much damage on the way out. A fish hook.
Okay, so seriously, over the last since May when I started writing again, I almost mentioned this on an earlier episode, but I thought it was more appropriate for here, so I'm glad that we're circling back. Every time we've been in between a project when I haven't had an outline to jump to, I would just kind of I'd write something for myself. So when I first started writing online, it was not fiction at all. I had a site called Writer Dad I stole from Dave. And, I would just write things about myself or my family, my past, whatever. And so I've been writing that kind of style, kind of just talking to myself is really what it is. And there's not really a specific plan for those so much as I need to keep writing. I need to keep writing. If I take a day off writing, it'll be hard to get back on the horse. If I take 2 days, it'll be really hard. If I take 3 days off, fuck it. I probably won't be writing for another month. So or I will, but it'll be really painful. It'll just be a few hundred words, which Dave calls writing, period. Right. But I think there's been something really valuable. I think that I know myself so much more as a 41-year-old man than I did as a 31-year-old man.
Wait, you're 41?
I am. Yeah. And it's not just because of the amount that I have, like, I mean, I've had a full year. I mean, building a business, talking to hundreds and hundreds of people in different capacities, joining masterminds, stuff like that, kind of, it just evolves you a little faster, I think, if you really pay attention and do the work. But I think I haven't done anything more than what anybody listening to this can do, which is write. And the more you write, the more you invent characters, the more you get in touch with yourself, the more you kind of understand the world around you and who you are and how you fit into it. And it's been a really great exploratory process. I forgot how much I was explaining to myself 10 years ago when I was writing for Writer Dad. I forgot how much there was to say, how much I would, heal myself. And so this year it was kind of interesting. I wrote 4 of these things back to back to back to back. I was in between drafts, and I took a week off just to write some nonfiction. And the first thing I wrote was for my sister Megan's. She was just turning 40 last September, a month ago. And Cindy suggested that I write something for Megan, and I didn't want to write anything for Megan because she's a great writer and a little judgmental, and just, no, that was a terrible idea. But I realized I really should write something for my sister. I never have before, and that's something I'm a little scared to do. So I like doing things that I'm scared to do because they make me a little bit stronger. And so I decided I would do that, but I realized I hadn't written anything nonfiction for myself in many, many years, including something when I turned 40. It had been 5 years. I wrote something right when I moved to Austin, which was almost 6 years ago. So I decided, okay, I'm going to write something about turning 40, and that'll put me in the mental space to write something for my sister's turning 40. So I wrote that one. I wrote my sister. And then after I wrote something for my sister, I really felt like all these emotions coming up for Rainbows and for what it was like working there. So I wrote something about working there, and like the inciting incident of your life is what that was about. And mine can be traced to a moment at Rainbows. And so, so I told that story. And then when I was all done with that, I was like, whoa, I have a lot of emotions right now. I have a lot of feelings. My head is very much in a place where it was right before I met my wife, and right before I left the flower shop and we started the preschool and all of this. And if you've been listening to the show for a while, then you probably have heard the Hero Parade story. But I've never actually told that story. I've never actually sat down and told that story to myself for permanence, where I can read it in 30 years or 40 years or 50 years, or I could share it with my children, or I could share it with Cindy. And this is actually kind of funny. She never knew that story because I never told her at the time because I knew it would piss her off. And so I said, oh, I just wrote the Hero Parade story. And she said, what? And I'm like, you've never heard the Hero Parade story? Well, let me read it to you. And so I do feel like there was a lot of value in the time that I spent this year. There's not a lot. There's probably 30,000 words of this stuff. But I think that those 30,000 words have had a high value, high impact on how they've affected me as a thinker and a creator, and just being in touch with myself. So whether you do Julia Cameron's morning pages, which I've never actually done, but 100% of the people who I know who have tried that have had substantial, awesome results. So that's a good thing to try. Anything that gets you in touch with who you are in some of these. I think Johnny posited a really great question to start all this, which was, who were we? Who were we yesterday that made us who we are today, or helped to inform us? And I think that's a question you can never stop asking, because I think that there are very specific things just now that who I was 10 years ago are affecting. I don't think that that ends. And I think that when you understand how your behavior affects yourself and changes yourself, it also matters with other people. I can say pretty confidently that I have greatly influenced the lives of both Dave and Johnny. They're better off for having known me. And I can say the same thing about them. I'm better off for having known them. The person I am is helping to shape the people that they are and will be. And that relationship is reciprocal. And so you have to be aware of who you are if you want the most optimum results in your life. And getting in touch with those things, I think, is very valuable as a creator.
Well, I can't come up with a better concluding note, so we'll end on that one. So I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into Dave's dark corners.
Hope I didn't depress everybody.
Yeah, it's okay. We brought it back with rainbows. So thanks for listening to the Story Studio podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Adios.
Bye.